The Atlantic, December 5th, 1872. A vast, unforgiving expanse of slate-gray water, churning under an indifferent sky. For days, the brigantine Dei Gratia had been making steady progress towards Gibraltar. A routine voyage, the rhythmic creak of timbers and the snap of sails the only companions for her small crew. But on this particular afternoon, something broke the monotony. A ship, oddly listing, her sails partly set, drifting aimlessly, a silent, solitary specter on the horizon. Captain David Morehouse, a seasoned mariner, instinctively felt a prickle of unease. There was something profoundly wrong about the way she moved, or rather, didn't move. She appeared abandoned. As the Dei Gratia drew closer, the eerie stillness of the other vessel became palpable. A heavy cloak draped over her decks. Her name, visible through a spyglass, confirmed Morehouse's growing apprehension. Mary Celeste. She was known to him, having sailed from New York 8 days before the Dei Gratia. But where was her crew? Where was the bustling activity expected of a ship at sea? A boarding party was dispatched, rowed across the choppy waters, their voices hushed by the sheer strangeness of the situation. Imagine that moment. The small boat pulling alongside the larger, silent hulk, the only sound the lapping of waves against the hull, the wind whistling through empty rigging. First Mate Oliver Devoe clambered aboard, his boots echoing unnervingly on the deserted deck. What he found defied all logic, all maritime understanding. The ship was intact. Her cargo of industrial alcohol, though some barrels had shifted, was largely untouched. The crew's personal belongings, their pipes, their clothing, were all still in their quarters. The captain's cabin held his sextant, his chronometer, his logbook. A chilling chronicle suddenly cut short. Food was still in the galley, dishes meticulously airen, as if a meal had just been prepared, or perhaps was about to be eaten. A sewing machine, with a child's garment unfinished, sat in the captain's wife's cabin. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no ransacking, no damage that could explain a hasty abandonment. Yet, not a soul remained. 8 people, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and the 7-man crew, had simply vanished. Into thin air it seemed, leaving behind a perfectly seaworthy ship, adrift and silent, a ghost in the vast, indifferent heart of the Atlantic. The Mary Celeste had become, in an instant, the ocean's most perplexing, enduring, and chilling mystery. A ship is more than wood and canvas. It is a microcosm of human life, a floating community with its own rhythms, hierarchies, and souls. To understand the void left on the Mary Celeste, one must first understand the lives that filled it. These were not phantoms or figures of lore. They were people of flesh and blood, with histories, families, and futures they believed were secure. Their disappearance was not merely a maritime incident. It was a brutal tear in the fabric of human certainty, an event so bizarre that it shocked the Victorian world to its core. At the heart of this vanished community was Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was the very picture of a respectable New England sea captain, 37 years old, a devout Christian, a teetotaler known for his steady hand and unwavering calm. Briggs was not a man prone to panic or flights of fancy. He was a seasoned mariner, born into a seafaring family in Marion, Massachusetts, and had spent most of his life on the water. The Mary Celeste was, in many ways, the culmination of his ambitions. He was a part owner, and this voyage was meant to be a proud and prosperous one. He was known to be fair to his crew and meticulous in his duties. His very character makes the mystery deeper. A reckless, superstitious captain might be imagined to make a rash decision, but Benjamin Briggs was the antithesis of that stereotype. He was a man of logic, faith, and profound competence. His presence on the ship was grounded by his family. The decision to bring his wife, Sarah Elizabeth Cobb Briggs, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia Matilda, speaks volumes. It suggests a voyage anticipated to be safe, routine, almost domestic. Sarah was a minister's daughter, a capable and beloved figure who had accompanied her husband on previous voyages. Her presence, and that of their child, transformed the Mary Celeste from a simple cargo vessel into a floating home. Imagine the sounds that must have filled those cabins. The laughter of a toddler echoing on the deck, Sarah playing the small melodeon she had brought aboard, the quiet conversations of a husband and wife in the calm of the evening. The discovery of her sewing machine, a needle still in a piece of Sophia's clothing, is perhaps the most heartbreaking clue of all. It's a snapshot of a life in progress, a mundane moment of maternal care, frozen in time. A mother, a father, a child, the elemental family unit, erased without a trace. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, had been left behind with his grandmother to attend school, a fortunate twist of fate that spared one member of the family, but adds another layer of tragedy to the story. He would grow up haunted by the family he lost to the sea's inscrutable silence. The crew handpicked by Captain Briggs were equally respectable. First Mate Albert G. Richardson was a friend of Briggs, also a part owner of the ship, and a man with a promising career ahead of him. He was newly married and considered by all to be a reliable and highly skilled seaman. Second Mate Andrew Gilling was a young Dane, just in his mid-20s, but all red. Why experienced? The ship's cook and steward, Edward William Head, was an American. The 4 seamen were all Germans from the Frisian Islands. The brothers Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, Arian Martins, and Gottlieb Gutschall. They were described as peaceful, disciplined sailors, not the kind of rough-and-tumble crew prone to mutiny or drunken brawls. Captain Briggs had written to his mother just before setting sail, praising the quality of his crew. This was a professional, orderly, and sober ship. This is why their disappearance was so profoundly shocking to the world. Had the ship been found dismasted, its hull breached, the story would have been a simple, sad maritime tragedy. Had the crew been known as drunkards or malcontents, mutiny would have been the obvious, if grim, explanation. But this was different. A good ship, a respected captain and his family, a competent crew, all vanishing from a vessel that was, for all intents and purposes, perfectly fine. News of the discovery spread via telegraph, and newspapers from London to New York seized upon the story. It was a tale that seemed purpose-built for the Victorian imagination, steeped as it was in tales of the Gothic, the spiritual, and the unknown. It wasn't the violence of their end that was terrifying, but the lack of it. It was the neatness, the order, the sheer maddening tidiness of their disappearance that horrified the public. It suggested a force that did not smash or break, but simply removed. Walk that deck again in your mind. Peer into the cabins. See the clothes folded in sea chests, the razors laid out for a morning shave that would never happen, a child's toy resting on a bunk. The silence is not empty. It is pregnant with the echoes of lives abruptly stopped. The ship was not a wreck. It was a stage, the set perfectly arranged, but the actors had vanished mid-performance. These were the Vannis, Head, a man of God and his loving wife, a 2-year-old girl who would never see her next birthday. 7 skilled mariners who had trusted their captain and their ship. They were not legends when they set sail from New York. They were ordinary people, swallowed whole by an extraordinary and eternal mystery, leaving the world to ask the question that still hangs over the silent gray waters of the Atlantic. What could possibly have happened to them? When a ship is lost at sea, the ocean itself is usually the prime suspect. It is a realm of immense and indifferent power, capable of swallowing vessels whole, leaving behind nothing but splintered wood and ghosts of memory. In the immediate aftermath of the Mary Celeste's discovery, it was to these familiar terrors of the deep that investigators and the public first turned. They sought a rational explanation, a known monster to blame for an unthinkable event. Yet, with every theory they proposed, the silent ship seemed to offer a quiet, confounding rebuttal. The most obvious culprit was weather. The North Atlantic in late autumn is a cauldron of tempests, a place where storms can materialize from a calm horizon with terrifying speed. Could a sudden, violent squall have descended upon the Mary Celeste? The ship was found with over 3 feet of water in the hold. and some of her sails were torn or missing. Proponents of this theory paint a picture of chaos. Waves crashing over the deck, the ship groaning under the strain, the pumps struggling to keep up. In a moment of supreme panic, fearing the vessel was about to founder, Captain Briggs might have made the fateful decision to temporarily abandon ship, lowering the lifeboat to wait out the storm at a safe distance, connected by a tow line. A snapped rope, a swamped boat, and the tragedy is complete. The storm passes, leaving the sturdy Mary Celeste to sail on, her crew now claimed by the waves. But this explanation, so neat on the surface, begins to fray under scrutiny. Captain Briggs was no novice. He would have known that his 282-ton brigantine was infinitely more survivable in a storm than a small open yawl. To abandon a fundamentally sound ship would be the absolute last resort for a man of his experience. And the ship itself bore no signs of a truly catastrophic weather event. Key navigational instruments, the captain's sextant and chronometer, were found securely in their cases. A vial of oil for his wife's sewing machine was found sitting undisturbed, as was her melodeon. A violent, ship-tossing storm would have thrown these items to the floor. Furthermore, the ship's log gave no indication of approaching foul weather. The last entry on November 25th noted fair conditions. The ship was wet, yes, but she was not mortally wounded. The evidence did not speak of a tempest. It spoke of a hurried but orderly departure from a vessel that was in no immediate danger of sinking. If not a monster of nature, then perhaps a monster of man. The specter of piracy was raised, a romantic and terrifying image of cutlasses and black flags. Could pirates have boarded the Mary Celeste, captured the crew for ransom or worse, and then, for some inexplicable reason, left the ship and its valuable cargo behind? This theory collapses almost instantly upon contact with the facts. The cargo of 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol was immensely valuable, worth a fortune on the black market. The pirates would have taken it. The crew's personal effects, including money and valuables stored in their sea chests, were untouched. Captain Briggs's navigation tools were the lifeblood of any mariner, and would have been prized loot. They remained. There were no signs of a fight, no bloodstains, no splintered doors or broken locks. The idea of pirates who board a ship, kidnap every living soul, including a woman and a small child, and then leave everything of value behind, is not just improbable. It is utterly absurd. Piracy is a cruelty. I'm of profit, and the Mary Celeste was a floating treasure chest left unlocked. This leads to the darkest of human threats: mutiny. A ship at sea is a pressure cooker of personalities, and tales of crews rising against their captains are as old as sailing itself. Could the German crewmen have harbored some secret resentment? Did they conspire to murder Captain Briggs, his family, and the two mates, before making their escape in the lifeboat? Again, the silent ship screams no. Everything known about Captain Briggs suggested he was a fair and just commander. He had praised his crew in letters home. A mutiny of such totality, one that included the murder of a woman and a 2-year-old child, would have been an act of extreme savagery. Such violence inevitably leaves its mark: blood, chaos, weapons left astray. The Mary Celeste was the opposite of this. She was orderly, almost peaceful. And why would a victorious mutinous crew abandon the very prize they had just fought and killed for? Where could they possibly hope to go in a small boat, in the middle of the vast Atlantic, that would be safer than the ship they now commanded? The logic simply evaporates. Bereft of rational human or natural culprits, the 19th century mind drifted towards the truly fantastical. This was an age where the depths of the ocean were still a realm of profound mystery, a place where monsters could be imagined to lurk. Could the ship have been attacked by a giant squid, a kraken of legend, its colossal tentacles snatching the crew from the decks one by one? Perhaps the sight of such a creature rising from the depths drove them mad with terror, causing them to flee for their lives in the yawl. It's a compelling, horrifying image. Yet, Like the other theories, it finds no purchase on the physical evidence. A creature large and powerful enough to terrify an entire crew into abandoning ship would have left its mark. Masts would be splintered, railings crushed, the deck scarred. The Mary Celeste was whole, her hull and rigging undamaged. She had been brushed not by a monster, but by a mystery. And so, the conventional explanations died on her quiet decks. The storm that leaves no trace of its fury. The pirates who steal nothing of value. The mutineers who abandon their prize. The sea monster that attacks without leaving a scratch. Each theory, when held up to the light, cast no shadow. They were specters of logic, grasping at a truth that remained stubbornly out of reach. The familiar monsters of the sea, storm, pirate, and mutineer, were all exonerated by the silent evidence. The truth, if it existed, had to lie somewhere else. Perhaps it was written in the captain's own hand, in the final cryptic entries of the ship's log. In the lonely, echoing world of the discovered Mary Celeste, the ship's logbook represented the most tangible link to the vanished crew. For a mariner, the log is more than a record. It is a sacrament, a precise and inviolable account of the vessel's journey through the world. It is the ship's memory, its confession, its truth, written in steady ink against the chaos of the sea. When the boarding party from the Dei Gratia found Captain Briggs's log in his cabin, they must have felt a surge of hope. Here, surely would be the answer. Here, the final days and hours of the crew would be laid bare, explaining the madness that led to their abandonment. They opened it to find not chaos, but a chilling and profound order. The entries were meticulous, the handwriting of Captain Briggs clear and professional. Page after page detailed the mundane and routine reality of a well-run ship at sea. Course adjustments, weather observations, sail changes, daily positions calculated with precision. The early days of the voyage from New York were uneventful. The log noted strong winds and heavy seas after their departure on November 7th, but nothing a sturdy vessel like the Mary Celeste and a seasoned crew couldn't handle. The entries paint a picture of a journey proceeding exactly as planned. A testament to the captain's competence. There is no hint of discord, no mention of illness, no creeping sense of dread. There is only the steady, rhythmic pulse of life at sea. The final entry in the main log was dated at 8 a.m. on November 25, 1872, 10 days before the ship was found. It reads with an unnerving normality. It states that at 5 a.m. that morning, they had sighted the island of Santa Maria, the easternmost island of the Azores, off their port bow. The entry notes their position and affirms that all was well. The ink was dry. The handwriting was firm. This was not the writing of a man in the grip of fear or facing an impending catastrophe. It was the calm, factual record of a captain who believed he was simply in the middle of another ordinary day on a long but manageable voyage. The ship was making good time, sailing past the Azores with the open stretch of the Atlantic before her, leading to the Strait of Gibraltar. According to the logbook, the world of the Mary Celeste was, on that morning, entirely as it should be. And then, the record stops. Not with an explanation, not with a frantic, scrawled cry for help, but with a sudden, complete, and terrifying silence. The pages that should have detailed the next 10 days of the voyage were blank. But there was one more piece of writing. On the cabin slate, used for jotting down calculations and notes before they were formally entered into the log, was a final ghostly message from the past. The last entry on the slate was for 9 a.m. on November 25th. It simply noted the ship's position, placing it a few miles off the coast of Santa Maria. This was the last recorded thought, the last piece of human intention documented aboard the Mary Celeste, a routine calculation, made in the morning light, that was never transferred to the permanent log. Something happened between the moment the chalk was put down and the time for the next log entry. Something so sudden, so total that it broke the sacred, centuries-old routine of the sea. Imagine Captain Briggs standing in his cabin, performing the simple arithmetic of navigation. He marks the position on the slate. And then, what? What could possibly have happened next to compel him and every other person aboard to leave the ship? They were within sight of land. The weather was fair. The ship was sound. The logbook tells us what they were doing, and the slate tells us where they were. But neither breathes a single syllable as to why. The silence that follows that final chalk mark is more terrifying than any frantic confession. It is a void. The documents, instead of solving the mystery, only sharpened its edges, giving it a precise time and place. 9 a.m., November 25th, 1872, off the coast of Santa Maria. That is the moment the world of the Mary Celeste ended. The navigational data itself tells a haunting story. The ship was found 10 days later, and nearly 400 nautical miles to the east. For 10 days, she had sailed on, unmanned, a ghost ship charting her own eerie course on the currents, her sails partly set, catching the wind as if still guided by a phantom hand. She had navigated the sea alone, a floating tomb, her only purpose to carry her mystery across the waves. The captain's log, the one place where an answer should have been found, offered only a final, clear waypoint before an inexplicable plunge into silence. It gave a time and a place for the mystery's beginning. But the reason lay elsewhere, perhaps hidden within the dark, silent hold of the ship itself. If the logbook was the ship's mind, then its cargo and contents were its body. And it was in the forensic examination of this body that the mystery of the Mary Celeste deepened from a strange event into a seemingly impossible paradox. The men from the Dei Gratia who conducted the first inventory walked through a world that should have been bustling with life, but was instead a museum of its abrupt absence. Every object they touched, every corner they explored, only added another layer of bewildering contradiction. Deep within the hold lay the ship's purpose for the voyage. 1,101 barrels of crude American alcohol, destined for Genoa, Italy, to be fortified into wine. This was not a trivial cargo. It was a small fortune. The manifest was found in the captain's cabin, and a count of the barrels confirmed the shipment was, by and large, intact. The hold was secure, the barrels properly stowed. Yet, there was one strange anomaly. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that 9 of the barrels were empty. Curiously, these 9 barrels were made of red oak, a wood known to be more porous than the white oak of the other 1,692 barrels. Had they leaked? Had their contents been deliberately drained? This small detail, the 9 empty barrels, became a focal point of speculation, a tiny specific clue in a sea of overwhelming ambiguity. More confounding than the cargo, however, were the ship's own provisions. In the galley and storerooms, there was enough food and fresh water to sustain the 10 people on board for at least 6 months. Barrels of salted beef, sacks of flour, crates of preserved vegetables, casks of water. All the necessities for a long ocean crossing were present and plentiful. This single fact dismantled a host of potential theories. The crew had not starved. They had not run out of water. They had not abandoned their vessel because it could no longer sustain them. In fact, they had left a ship that was far better equipped to keep them alive than any lifeboat. It was a floating pantry, a bastion of security against the desolation of the sea, and they had turned their backs on it. The personal effects of the crew told an even more intimate and chilling story. In the forecastle where the sailors slept, their sea chests were closed but unlocked. Inside were their belongings: spare clothes, letters from home, tobacco and pipes, small amounts of money. These were the humble treasures of working men, the comforts they carried with them across the world. They had left them all behind. In the captain's quarters, the scene was even more poignant. Captain Briggs's navigation tools, his books, his boots standing neatly by his bunk, Sarah's melodeon, her sewing kit, the unfinished garment for her daughter, Sophia's small toys. They had left in the clothes they were wearing, and seemingly nothing else. Imagine the moment of departure. What could be so terrifying, so immediate, that a mother would flee without grabbing a warm coat for her child? What peril could make a sailor abandon his wages, or a captain his chronometer? It suggests a flight of utter desperation, a panicked exodus with no time for a single backward glance. And yet, this image of desperate flight clashed violently with the ship's overall condition. There was no chaos. The galley was tidy. Cabins were in order. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, nothing to suggest a sudden, violent lurch of the ship or a frantic search for belongings. The one key piece of evidence that confirmed the crew had left deliberately was the absence of the ship's yawl, a small lifeboat that would have been stowed on the main deck. The davits from which it would have been lowered were empty. They had chosen to leave. They had taken the time to launch the boat, a procedure that requires coordination and effort. So the paradox was this: evidence of a calm, orderly, and deliberate departure, yet a departure in which they left behind everything essential for survival. It was a planned panic, a methodical catastrophe. A few other strange clues were noted. One of the ship's 2 pumps, used to clear water from the bilge, was found partially disassembled on the deck, its pieces laid out neatly beside it. Had they been attempting a repair? Did they believe the ship was taking on water faster than they could manage, even though the amount found by the Dei Gratia crew was not life-threatening? A frayed rope was found trailing in the water from the ship's stern. Could this have been a tow line to the lifeboat, meant for a temporary evacuation, that eventually snapped, leaving them fatally adrift? In his cabin, the captain's sword was found, and early reports from the salvage inquiry mentioned faint reddish stains on the blade. This sparked immediate, lurid speculation of violence, but the stains were never proven to be blood, and were almost certainly rust. Still, the image lingered. The ship was a collection of contradictions: a hurried departure with no signs of haste, a panicked flight with no evidence of fear. The clues did not point to a single, simple answer. Instead, they whispered of stranger possibilities, of hidden dangers that defy the common logic of the sea. They had food but chose to face starvation. They had shelter but chose to face the open ocean. The Mary Celeste had given them everything they needed to live, and for reasons unknown, they had chosen to leave it all behind. The simple monsters had been slain. Storms, pirates, and mutineers, the usual suspects in any maritime tragedy, had been exonerated by the silent testimony of the ship itself. Their explanations were too crude, too violent, too simple for the intricate and delicate mystery of the Mary Celeste. In their place, over the decades that followed, new theories began to form. Theories that were more complex, more nuanced, and in their own way, more terrifying. These are the theories that refuse to die, for they are the only ones that attempt to reconcile the ship's profound contradictions, the simultaneous evidence of calm procedure and desperate flight. Of all these, one theory has gained more traction than any other: a chillingly plausible sequence of events that begins deep within the ship's dark and silent hold. The key, it suggests, lies with the cargo. 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol. Alcohol is a volatile substance. It breathes. It turns from liquid to vapor, and in an enclosed space, that vapor can become a potent, invisible bomb. The theory posits a cascade of natural events. The Mary Celeste had sailed from the cold of a New York November into the warmer, sunnier climate of the Azores. This change in temperature would have caused the alcohol in the barrels to expand and vaporize, building immense pressure within the wooden casks. Remember the 9 empty barrels, the ones made of porous red oak. It is here the theory finds its footing. It is believed that the pressure inside these specific barrels became too great, and they failed. The result would not have been a fiery Hollywood explosion. It would have been a terrifying acoustic event. The barrel heads would have blown out with a series of deep, rumbling concussions, a sound from the bowels of the ship that would mimic an impending catastrophic explosion. A jet of vapor and alcohol foam would have burst forth, and the hatches to the hold would have rattled in their fittings. Captain Briggs, a sober and responsible man with his wife and child aboard, would have been faced with an immediate and terrible choice. Hearing the violent boom from below and likely smelling the overpowering fumes of raw alcohol, he could have easily concluded that the entire cargo was about to detonate, a chain reaction that would vaporize his ship and everyone on it. There would be no time to investigate. The only rational act, the only responsible act, would be to save his family and crew. This is where the paradox begins to resolve. The fear of an imminent explosion explains the haste and the panic. His immediate order would be to get everyone off the ship, but it would be a controlled panic. Briggs was a professional. He would not simply throw everyone into the sea. He would order the crew to open the main cargo hatch to vent the dangerous fumes, a task that could account for the disassembled pump if it was obstructing the hatch. Then, he would order the launch of the lifeboat. This was not to be a permanent abandonment. It was a temporary precautionary evacuation. The plan would be to tow the yawl behind the ship on a long line, waiting at a safe distance for the fumes to dissipate and the danger to pass. This explains the order and the missing lifeboat. It explains why they took no belongings. They expected to be back aboard within hours. Here, the theory delivers its tragic final act. Imagine the 10 of them, huddled in the small boat, watching their ship from a few hundred yards astern. A sudden, unexpected squall could have descended. The wind could have picked up, filling the Mary Celeste's sails and causing her to lurch forward, snapping the tow line. Or the line itself, perhaps hastily secured in the emergency, simply failed. In an instant, the gap would widen. The sturdy, empty Mary Celeste would begin to pull away, sailing perfectly, relentlessly, into the distance. The 10 people in the tiny oar-powered boat would be left behind, watching their only hope, their floating home, disappear over the horizon, left to the mercy of the vast, indifferent Atlantic. This theory is powerful because it requires no villains, no sea monsters, no supernatural forces. It requires only physics, weather, and a single, understandable, and ultimately fatal misjudgment by a good captain trying to save his family. Other theories persist, rooted in the raw, unpredictable power of the ocean itself. The concept of the rogue wave, once a sailor's myth, is now a scientifically documented reality, a single monstrous wall of water that can rise from a calm sea. It is possible such a wave struck the Mary Celeste, not a wave that would smash it to pieces, but one that could have washed the deck clean, taking Captain Briggs, his family who may have been on deck, and any crewman with them. The remaining crew, finding their captain and his family gone, might have panicked, believed the ship was cursed or fatally damaged, and fled in the lifeboat. A less dramatic version of this theory suggests a large wave swamped the ship, filling the hold and leading the crew to misread the water levels. Fearing the ship was foundering far faster than it was, and with one pump already out of commission for repair, they made the logical but incorrect decision to abandon ship. The primary flaw in this theory remains the placid state of the cabins. A wave of such magnitude should have left a trail of chaos below deck. These attempts to explain the mystery through a logical, albeit extraordinary, chain of events are compelling. They offer a narrative that the rational mind can grasp. And yet, for over a century, a significant portion of the public and the maritime world has found them lacking. Logic and science offer a plausible, tragic sequence of events. But for some, the clean, cold calculus of vapor pressure or wave dynamics fails to capture the profound dread the Mary Celeste evokes. For them, the ship was not merely unlucky, it was cursed. When logic unravels and evidence leads only to contradiction, the human mind often seeks refuge in older, darker truths. The sea has always been a place of superstition, a realm where the veil between the known and the unknowable is perilously thin. Sailors have forever told stories of malevolent forces, of ghost ships crewed by the damned, and of vessels that were simply born unlucky. As the years passed and the mystery of the Mary Celeste remained unsolved, the story began to drift from the pages of investigative reports and into the shadowed waters of folklore. The ship ceased to be merely an unfortunate vessel. It became a cursed one. The idea that the ship itself was malevolent is a narrative that finds troubling purchase in its history. Before she was the Mary Celeste, she was the Amazon, and her career under that name was a litany of misfortune. Launched in Nova Scotia in 1861, her maiden voyage was tragically cut short when her captain suddenly fell ill and died. On that same voyage, she collided with another vessel in the English Channel. She was accident-prone, a ship that seemed to attract trouble. She ran aground, was sold and resold, and was eventually found ashore in a storm, a wreck that was salvaged and given a new name, a new identity, Mary Celeste. It was an attempt to wash away the bad luck, to give the vessel a clean slate. But for those who believe in curses, a name is only a mask. The ship's soul, they would argue, remained unchanged. It was a vessel that had tasted death early and seemed destined for a legendary, tragic end. In this transformation from a simple ship to a cursed artifact, the Mary Celeste became the living embodiment of the ocean's most enduring ghost story, the tale of the Flying Dutchman. For centuries, sailors had whispered the legend of a spectral ship, captained by a man who defied God and was doomed to sail the seas for eternity, never making port. To see the Dutchman was the gravest of omens, a portent of disaster. It was a myth, a campfire story to be told on long, dark watches. And then, on a calm day in 1872, the myth became real. A ship was found sailing perfectly, her sails set, her course steady, with not a single living soul aboard. The Mary Celeste was no longer just a mystery. She was the Flying Dutchman made manifest, a tangible ghost ship discovered in the broad light of day. She proved that the most terrifying legends were not just stories. The ocean really could keep a ship and damn its crew. The vessel's story also became entwined with the folklore of the sea's most mysterious places. While she was not found within the infamous Sargasso Sea, her final known position near the Azores placed her on its doorstep. The Sargasso, a vast calm sea of floating seaweed within the Atlantic, has long been known as the graveyard of ships, a place where vessels can become hopelessly entangled, their crews driven mad by the unnatural stillness and the endless whispering weeds. It is a region of maritime dread, a place where the ocean is said to be watchful, patient, and hungry. The tale of the Mary Celeste seemed to echo the legends of the Sargasso, a crew vanishing not in a storm, but in a strange, perhaps supernatural, calm. It tapped into the ancient fear that the ocean itself is a conscious entity, capable of luring sailors to their doom not with tempests, but with a siren's call, a hypnotic mystery that draws them willingly over the rail and into the depths. As the years turned into decades, the supernatural explanations grew more elaborate. The story became a canvas for every fear of the unknown. Was it an encounter with a creature unknown to science? An abduction by beings not of this world? In the 20th century, the Mary Celeste would be retroactively absorbed into the mythology of the Bermuda Triangle, despite being thousands of miles away. The name of the ship simply became synonymous with inexplicable disappearance. It represented a thin place, a moment where the rules of our world were temporarily suspended, and a ship, with its 10 souls, simply slipped through the cracks. These theories are not born of evidence, but of an emotional need. The idea of a curse, of a ghost ship, of an abduction, is somehow more satisfying to the human spirit than a mundane, tragic accident. A curse gives the event meaning. It elevates a random tragedy into a dark fable, a cautionary tale about the powers that lie beyond our understanding. Whether the Mary Celeste was the victim of physics or phantoms, of a snapped rope or a broken taboo, its fate was sealed the moment it was found empty. It sailed out of the realm of maritime history and into the darker, deeper waters of legend. It was no longer a ship of wood and iron, but a vessel of pure fear, destined to sail forever in the human imagination. The world moves on. The age of sail has given way to the age of steam, then diesel, then nuclear power. We have charted the ocean floor, we track vessels by satellite, and we can communicate instantaneously from any point on the globe. The sea, while still powerful, has been stripped of much of its mystery. And yet, the story of the Mary Celeste remains, a ghost from a bygone era, its power undiminished by time and technology. It endures because it is more than a historical puzzle. It is a resonant, primal fear, a story that speaks to the dread of the unknown that lies just beneath the placid surface of our orderly lives. The fate of the vessel itself was as grim and unlucky as its most famous voyage. After being salvaged, the Mary Celeste became a pariah of the seas. She was seen as a haunted, cursed ship. Superstitious sailors whispered her name, and her value plummeted. She was sold and resold, passing through 17 different owners over the next decade, each one seemingly unable to rid themselves of the bad luck that clung to her timbers. No voyage was profitable. No captain felt at ease at her helm. She became a floating relic of an unspeakable event, a ship whose very name was synonymous with inexplicable tragedy. Her final chapter was not one of glory or quiet retirement, but of sordid crime. In 1885, her last owner, a man named Gilman C. Parker, deliberately tried to wreck her on a reef in Haiti in a clumsy attempt at insurance fraud. But the ship that had survived the unknown resisted. She refused to sink, becoming lodged on the coral, a stubborn, broken monument. There she was stripped by salvagers and slowly battered to pieces by the wind and the waves. A final, ignominious end on a distant shore. But the ship's physical destruction did nothing to destroy its story. The legacy of the Mary Celeste is not in its splintered timbers, but in the permanent chill it left on the human psyche. It terrifies us today for the very same reasons it terrified the Victorians. It is the perfect mystery. Not a single body was ever recovered. Not one piece of wreckage from the missing lifeboat was ever found. No deathbed confession ever emerged. There are no answers, and no hope of ever finding them. The event left behind a vacuum, a perfect void of explanation, and our minds, which abhor a vacuum, rush to fill it with our deepest fears. The true horror of the Mary Celeste lies in its interruption of the mundane. It is not a story of a ship sailing into a monstrous storm or a bloody battle. It is the story of a Tuesday morning, of a logbook entry being made, of a child's dress being mended, of a meal about to be served. It suggests that the fabric of our reality is impossibly thin, and that without warning, without sound, without reason, it can be torn away. It is the fear that we are all, at any given moment, only one step away from an inexplicable vanishing. And perhaps most profoundly, it is the betrayal of the very idea of safety. A ship is a fortress, a bubble of order and life in the midst of a hostile, empty wilderness. The 10 people aboard the Mary Celeste had everything they needed to survive. A sound ship, food, water, and shelter. And they left it. They abandoned their fortress and cast themselves into the wilderness in a small, open boat. This is the story's unnerving core. We are forced to ask the question, what could possibly be more terrifying than the certainty of the unforgiving sea? The silent decks of the Mary Celeste provide the only possible answer. Whatever happened on that ship? For over 150 years, we have stared at this story, turning it over and over, hoping a new angle of light might reveal a hidden clue. But there is nothing more to see. The ship has given up all its secrets, and the greatest secret of all is that it has none to give. All that is left is the silence. The unnerving, profound silence of a ship sailing on without its crew. A ship that has become a symbol. It is the eternal reminder that the world is not as solid as it seems, that the answers are not always there to be found, and that the ocean is very, very good at keeping secrets. We live our lives surrounded by routine, secure in the belief that the world operates by a set of unbreakable rules. The Mary Celeste is the eternal, chilling whisper that perhaps it does not. It is the story of a door that opened on a calm morning in the middle of the ocean, and a captain, a family, and a crew who simply stepped through it and were gone.